to staff regarding a potential sales tax sponsored by County Council and the Executive Office. County Council, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I actually don't have a whole lot on this. I've been given direction previously by this board to go ahead and begin drafting a sales tax ordinance and a resolution of intent with respect to expenditures. We have, I think at that time, I mentioned I wouldn't be ready by this meeting, and I'm not. We have started the drafting process. However, in the interim, I understand that there's been enough discussion from some individual board members about possibly wanting to look at changing direction that there may potentially be some efficiency. We do want the board to have an opportunity. I don't want to sort of spend too much time drafting something that may end up not being the direction the board wants to go. So that's the reason this item is on.
Supervisor Haschak.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Well, certainly we have lots of needs in this county. We looked at a couple of them at the last meeting about the fire services, about emergency medical services. We have water, we have mental health, we have housing. We have an endless number, it seems, of needs in this county. I guess my concern with this sales tax is, it was put together hastily, and when we do that, we don't do it well. We saw that with the cannabis ordinance when we tried to push it through, and it didn't work. We saw it with the consolidation of the financial offices in the county, and it seems like there's lots of issues that still haven't been resolved, and with that. And I see that with this sales tax too. One issue is that it's a general fund tax. So the commitment of this board might not be the commitment of the next board. It's just a resolution, and I don't think that the people like that. We've had some Brown Act issues, I think, and the different discussions going on certainly raises the eyebrows of many people. This is a regressive tax, and the public opinion is not in favor of it. And so, I think what we need is a plan going forward where we have open discussion, we have committed funds to certain causes that we believe are highest priorities, and we designate those. So what I'm willing to propose right now is I'm going to move a 1/8 cent sales tax dedicated to the fire departments. And then, in the future, we can look at other sales taxes going forward that might be a more comprehensive look at fire, the health of our communities and potential, fire safety issues that are forest health, all those, and we certainly have water issues. And so, but there's certainly enough questions about what's going on with how the money will be used for water that I think we need to come up with a real plan. So my motion is to have 1/8 of a cent sales tax directed towards the fire departments.
Supervisor Jordy.
Yeah, Supervisor Haschak, to clarify, this would be restricted so the voters would know that they would have a guarantee as to how the money would be spent?
Right.
Okay. And I would second that motion. And my thoughts on this are, I think what I've heard, I think what Supervisor Haschak has heard repeatedly is the public does not want to see a forever tax that just goes into the general fund, that's non-binding with no guarantees. If the board is unwilling to support a guarantee into how the dollars are spent, then it would only be a short-term temporary tax as a guardrail on the Board of Supervisors, the supervisors and future supervisors to not have, so there wouldn't be any hanky-panky in how the money's being spent. So that the money would be spent appropriately, because future supervisors would want to get the tax renewed, presumably. And so they wouldn't misappropriate the funds for something else. So it'd be a short lease, 6-8 years, if there's no guarantees. But what we've heard is that people want guarantees on how the funds are spent. And the one thing that they seem to be supporting consistently is additional money for the fire departments. And I think as Supervisor Hashak said, if there was a more comprehensive proposal, the fire districts plus money for home hardening, the kinds of things that our Fire Safe Council does, then we could look at potentially a 1/4-cent sales tax. But right now there is no other proposal. The only proposal we have that has any specificity is coming from the Mendocino Fire Districts Association in a funding allocation. And based on that, if it's only for that purpose, we're proposing a 1/8 cent. Again, we would potentially support a 1/4 cent if it included the types of activities of the Fire Safe Council. I invite people in the audience to come to the microphone and speak about a fire tax. I personally think that they've been done a disservice by supervisors proposing tagging what is a general sales tax with a promise that money will go to fire services, but in fact, also a promise that some of the money would go to ambiguous water projects. As we discussed this morning, and I invite people to look at the memo I produced this morning, the history of the water tax comes directly from the Inland Water and Power Commission. They hired a pollster, political consultants to look at a parcel tax for the Eel River Diversion Project. They then turned to Supervisor McGordy asking for, it's right there in their minutes, asking for a sales tax. That's where this water sales tax comes from. It is not intended, it has never been intended to help out all corners of Mendocino County. And the water tax, if it is attached to a Board of Supervisors tax, is going to sink this tax. The other thing that's going to sink a 3/8 cent sales tax is just the sheer size of the tax. It's too big of a tax. And finally, a tax of the Board of Supervisors that does not guarantee how the money is being spent, only has a fig leaf of a non-binding resolution, is going to lose. So I hope the people who are coming here to speak in favor of a fire tax address the board and ask the board not to tie them, a weight around their neck by adding this horrendous, outrageous water tax to what could be a united Board of Supervisors behind a fire and fire safety tax. So I'll second the motion and invite public comment.
So, well, we're not quite there. Supervisor Mulhern?
Thank you. I am not certain why some supervisors are not recognizing the proposal that I put forward as a plan. As I discussed this morning, I sit on a fire and EMS ad hoc with one supervisor. I sit on the IWPC as an alternate with a different supervisor. When the conversation came up about sales taxes, that was immediately brought to County Council and agendized for May 17th, where this board had a conversation in an open public forum about the potential of a fire and water tax. On June 8th, I brought forward a proposal for 60% of the 3/8 sunsetting from Measure B to be used for fire and 40% to be used for water. In my proposal, I proposed that we follow the Prop 172 allocations that the fire districts have already used. I met with the Fire Districts Association. The 40% or the 60% that I had proposed using 1/3 as a base and 2/3 base per capita. After a really great conversation, they had both large fire districts and very, very small districts. I mean, we're talking about fire districts that run 4,000 plus calls per year and fire districts that run 58 calls per year. They were able to come up with a strategy that would work for all of them, and in an agreement have brought forward the attachment to my memo, which was uploaded to eComment on Sunday and then also uploaded to the board. Yesterday it was also emailed to the board, the full board, so that everybody could read what I was proposing. Regarding the 40% for water, as I've stated, what I wanted to do was come up with a plan that would help distribute those funds countywide. And that's why I'm proposing for each of the cities presents one member for this technical advisory group, one inland water district member, one county water district member, one Mendocino County representative, and one tribal representative. I think that that plan with those representatives is really what's going to hold future boards accountable. And I also think that fire and imminent danger, as well as year 3 of a drought, are serious climate needs, life, health, and safety needs that our community needs us to address now, this year, and not in the future. So the 3/8, as is proposed in my memo, I think will be able to provide funding for fire departments, some of which have already gone for a parcel tax and failed, some of which we're proposing a parcel tax for November of 2022. And if this sales tax moves forward today with 3/8, they'll be able to take that off the backs of their residents. When you talk about a sales tax, that is paid for by residents from all over the county, but more importantly, from our visitors that come from Lake County and Sonoma County to come shopping, and our tourists, which, as we all know, are using our fire and EMS services, and also are contributing to the challenges where places like the village of Mendocino really relies on that tourist income. And without water, they can't continue to provide the resources that they are providing, the jobs, etc. So, I'm not sure why it's being disregarded that I brought this plan forward and that there isn't any conversation about how to make it stronger. I understand that there's some passionate advocates for a different sales tax, but I would like to be recognized that I brought forward something that we should be talking about as an opportunity to be able to really provide funding for our fire departments and for seed funding for our water agencies throughout the county.
Supervisor McGordy.
No, I want to build on that because I think that's absolutely right. I've served on the water ad hoc for the last year and a half, and to me, the biggest existential threat facing Mendocino County is loss of water for the two principal industries that keep us going. One of them is tourism because of water insecurity between Fort Bragg and the border of Sonoma County. The other one would be the interior parts of Mendocino County, certainly along the Russian River, but in all communities. I mean, it's something that I hear on the ad hoc is from everyone, that there's a need all over the county. So we have places like Walhalla that can't build any more desperately needed housing. Redwood Valley's in the same boat. I don't think that we're unaware or clueless or whatever you want to describe us as. We have a very good idea of what we're going to do. We need a coordinator to basically be our expert to help us plan, design, and get grants to take advantage of the money that's available during this drought stress period, drought emergency, and update our systems. We're working with technology that's over 100 years old. And to me, that's probably the biggest reason why I moved this forward. It wasn't just because Powder Valley project was in danger or whatever. I mean, certainly the Russian River needs money, but we have to have a place at the table. What I don't want to see happen is what happened in 1957, where essentially we missed out because the county couldn't get it together. The coastal people were against the interior people. And we ceded our water rights to Sonoma County. I could see the same thing happening again. And all this is going to happen in the next 2 years. So while it would be nice to take the time to have a really carefully laid out plan that would come to vote in 2024, I'm just afraid we're going to be too late. The emergency is now. It's not in the future. And I also want to let you know something, Supervisor Jordy, that I don't think you completely understood. So when Fort Bragg got the $8 million that they did to improve their water system, that was a direct result of the ad hoc committee. So that was a conversation between Josh Metz and John Smith. John Smith talking about the need to improve their water system. Josh put John together with the Department of Drinking Water, with Department of Water Resources, who found the engineering firm that designed that project and wrote the grant. And that's how that happened. It wasn't just sort of a random group of citizens that did it. So I know that Mendocino County can do things effectively. We have the right people in place. And I think the fact that we secured close to $20 million last year for water projects in our county is significant. The last thing I want to address is agricultural water, because that's something that a lot of you think that you're going to be paying for, which you're not. So we will have a place at the table. Negotiations are going on right now, and they're very expensive, and expecting the Mendocino Inland Water Power Commission to pick up the tab by itself is going to be very, very difficult. They have an annual budget of about $250,000. Legal fees probably to participate in the reassignment of water rights from the Eel River, if it's even feasible, to the Russian River, is going to be in the tune of about $1 million a year in legal fees. So that's something that's too heavy a lift for that JPA to be able to do. So what's happening is that Sonoma County Water has organized a Russian River Water Users Forum to get pretty much define the boundaries of a future special district that would handle that water. And they will eventually monetize all the water in the Russian River. Everybody will pay a market price. Now, I don't know what that's going to be, but it'll have to be for costs of acquiring those water rights and paying for the operation of the system. So this is pretty much interim funding. And if you want to put a time limit on it, if you want to say, okay, 6 years, 7 years, whatever you want to do, I think there's room certainly in the discussion for that, because I don't think that the water users expect this money to be available forever. It's really not so much for providing infrastructure as it is for providing leadership and grants. It's something that we're really missing right now in a water policy. As one of my friends said, you wouldn't build a house without a kitchen, and having a county our size, as arid as it is without a functioning water agency is really a major oversight, and it's something that I think we have to address. Finally, the outlying communities too in District 3, where Supervisor Paschak is, also have needs too. They really want to have some understanding of what is underneath the ground, what are their aquifers. We don't know right now, and people are very upset. Another ad hoc that we're working with is the ad hoc on water extraction, and there's people that want to regulate it. Right now, we have no mechanism to do that. So again, having a water tax allows us to do these things and move forward with a really coherent and meaningful water policy at a time of extreme environmental crisis.
Supervisor Haschak.
Yeah, there's been a lot of issues brought up, and I think that we all want to confront the challenges that we have in the county. At the same time, we are in a very difficult economic situation for the county. I think people are feeling the pinch from inflation and all the other factors, and a regressive tax of 3/8 is not the way to go at this point. If you add that on to what the library people are trying to do of getting a 1/4 cent, then we would be increasing the tax burden on everyone, not decreasing it. And so even with the water issue that we just talked about, Supervisor McGorty brings up really good points. We do have to deal with our water situation. We committed to standing up a water agency, and Supervisor McGorty and I have been working on that for a long time. But when I look at the proposal, I'm hearing, well, the water part will be for grants, and this group of 8 is going to decide, what the vision is for these grants and all that. And if they're meeting 4 times a year, it doesn't seem like that's the way to really get a vision. And then Supervisor McGorty just said, well, we need leadership and grant writing capacity. And so, I don't even think there's clarity on what the water issue would be. And then with the fire, I think that we really need to, if we can support the fire districts with the 1/8 of a cent, And then we look at a comprehensive view of what we're trying to do to create safer communities. You know, because we do have wildfires, we have climate change, we have those factors, we got tree mortality out here that's incredible. And so we need to have a comprehensive approach. So, you know, I think that we have a motion on the floor. I think we should vote on it.
Supervisor Jordy.
I mean, the water tax is completely unnecessary for the purposes that Supervisor McGordy just mentioned. I mean, just simple back of the envelope estimates show that the Potter Valley Irrigation District, which virtually gives their water away at $22.50 an acre foot, knowing that the state rate for irrigation water is probably $150, $200 an acre foot. If they simply went to the state average, if the Russian River Flood Control went to the state average for their wholesale irrigation water, those two entities by themselves could produce well over $1 million a year. So there's problem solved. $1 million a year, just those two boards take action. Nobody's stopping them. But instead, nope, they want to ask everybody in Mendocino County to pay an extra sales tax to bail them out because they don't want their own customers to pay the going rate. I mean, it is so offensive. This whole water tax is the most absurd proposal ever to befall the people of Mendocino County. And if it's attached to a sales tax that goes on the ballot, it's going down, and it deserves to go down in big defeat. So I hope everybody who came to today's meeting to speak in favor of fire service will back off from this ill-advised proposal by Supervisors Mulhern and McGordy to attach this ridiculous and offensive water tax to a fire service tax. Supervisor Hashak and I are offering a viable plan that could pass in November, potentially, because one, it would still enable the voters in 2023 to know that their taxes will be going down in 2023 because the 1/8 cent, and if the library tax passes, it's an extra 1/8 cent, they still see their taxes go down by 1/8 of a cent. So this is the most plausible scenario possible. The 3/8 cent promises for this group, promises for that group, no guarantees for nobody. The only guarantee with this 3/8 cent sales tax that Supervisor Mulhern has put together is that everybody's taxes go up. There's no guarantee on how any of the money is being spent. So I hope we hear from the members of the audience today.
So Supervisor Jordy, we always take public comment, so by all means we will. I would ask my colleagues to strive to leave this meeting with unity. And I'm not siding with one idea or another at this point. I recognize that we have a lot of the county covered by volunteers who are aging, fewer and fewer can serve, more and more call volume. And I think fire's been telling us this for a long time. The reason it hasn't really come to a head is firefighters can't strike. There's the kind of people who volunteer, they can't say no. There's a 911 call. They're never going to not show up unless they finally get to an age where they just can't do it anymore. And I'm afraid that's where we're headed. So I appreciate that you're looking for a means to hold over the fire and emergency response. I think that's critical to our rural communities, which is most of the county. On water, I do agree that water security is a county-wide issue. And I'm not talking about Potter Valley. Potter Valley project isn't in my district. But my district and the coast has water security concerns in the long term. I guess I'm wondering, is there a way for us to solve the fire and EMS issue with a proposed sales tax and attack the water security using general fund? Is there a way to restructure our priorities in the budget to use some discretionary funds? What we don't want to have happen is the state shows up with millions of dollars of funding for water projects because we have a statewide drought, statewide water crisis, and our county doesn't have any credible plans together. We don't know where we need money. We don't know what it's for. We don't know what's under the ground. Is there a middle ground where we use some general funds so that we can have credible plans and go after millions of dollars of state funds for water projects? Supervisor Haschek.
You know, with the fire situation, certainly, you know, volunteer fire departments throughout this county are, you know, overtaxed, you know, and it's great contributions from the volunteers. but I don't see a needs assessment for the fire districts. Is there any kind of study being done? You know, we had a presentation about the ambulance services last meeting, you know, and we're waiting for some kind of needs assessment for that. And so, you know, I think different fire departments are different because they're funded differently by their communities. I think some of the fire departments, you know, have enough, and they've, some of the districts have put on parcel taxes or other kinds of taxes for them to get funded. And so, you know, I don't know what the differences are between all the fire districts in the county, and until we have that, I think that would be very helpful knowledge, you know, what we're doing with fire districts, what we're doing with ambulance services.
I want to respond to that. I agree with you. It would be nice to have. It's difficult to obtain that because you're asking the same people who volunteer to train every week, maybe go to hundreds of calls, try to raise funds, now to put on a needs assessment. These aren't the sort of people who do studies. They don't do needs assessments. They take an EMT class and they show up to help their neighbors. The county could certainly arrive and do that sort of study. But I think what fire has been telling us for many years now is anything we do is a Band-Aid, but they'll take that bigger Band-Aid. We did that with the TOT, and they're seeing some funds. It's helping. But we're starting out with a model where people serve the community for emergency response for no compensation at all. That's our model. Basically zero. There's a few paid firefighters in this county. Ukiah has some. Fort Bragg has a couple. Most of our county is served by people working for free. So and I think we highlighted it in our strategic plan that this may not be a viable model long term. And you see counties that have gone through a transition to partially paid and then maybe fully paid. You look back and you see they were at the point we are now, where the model is starting to fail. I have fire districts telling me their average responder is age 53. I think in Elk it's even higher. Well, that's not a sustainable model. You don't have younger people coming in, probably because they don't have jobs in the community. There isn't cheap housing like there was in the past. Different economic situation. And so there isn't another generation to fill in and pick up some of this slack. So if the board does nothing, we have a public safety hazard. And our number one priority is funding public safety. We're supposed to fund public safety before anything else. I think fire, emergency response, life-saving response is part of that public safety. Supervisor McGorty.
So I guess my question to Supervisor Jordy then is, what do you say to the coastal people? I mean, you have a solution for Potter Valley and the Redwood Flood Control District, but you know, my concern is really about urban use too. So it's not just the farmers that are going to have issues here. It's all of the communities, starting from Potter Valley, Redwood Valley, Calpella, Ukiah, Popland, all the way down to Healdsburg, have issues if the water curtailments take place again this year, and having adequate water for health and human safety and fisheries, and if anything's left over, then maybe agriculture gets some too. And what do you say to all the coastal communities who, right at the moment, are, you know, facing trucking water again this year? So do you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, "Oh well, your problem, not mine"? Because Fort Bragg's got water.
Well, we all make decisions about where we live. You know, we can't expect urban levels of services if we choose to live in the most remote areas of the county. It's just not realistic. So, you know, some people have unlimited wealth and they can own a house anywhere in Mendocino County. Most of us don't have unlimited wealth, so we make choices. And the town of Mendocino, yes, it has issues, but they've known they've had those issues for decades and they need to resolve them with the assistance of helping agencies. You know, the county of Mendocino, as you said, with no sales tax, assisted local governments throughout Mendocino County with amazing partnership from our state senator, Mike McGuire, and Assemblymember Wood. We're able to help secure over $20 million for water projects in Mendocino County. It kind of proves my point. We don't need the sales tax. We just need to work together.
Well, you know, a few weeks ago when we were having our discussion on the water agency, we were kind of shaking the furniture and looking under the cushions for coins to be able to fund it. And I don't know that things have changed. So what's our alternative there? Would you agree that the Board of Supervisors should be in a leadership position to provide essential needs for our community?
Yes, and Supervisor Hashak and I both offered to support amending the ordinance that requires the county to give $600,000 to Visit Mendocino. Our proposal would have stopped providing a match for the revenues they collect in the cities, and we did not get a third vote. So that was $350,000 that we could have freed up for things such as the water agency. That option is still available to the board for next year's budget.
Any thoughts on how we find unity?
I think we should go to public comment because we have a motion on the floor.
Public comment starting in the room.
Hey all, thanks so much. I'm Angela DeWitt, a Battalion Chief Training Officer, Anderson Valley Fire Department. I'm here today on behalf of Chief Avila. It is his daughter's birthday party. He was unable to attend. He did ask me to extend a particular thank you to Supervisor Mulhern for your work on this package and to the supervisors in general for considering this issue. Anderson Valley Fire Department is in support of the 3/8 cent tax for fire departments in the county. The funds are greatly needed to allow us to provide the level of services that our residents have come to expect of us. We have continuing demands on our growth and our capacity to meet the needs and expectations of our communities. The funds are also critical for infrastructure such as water projects for fire suppression, which you know, which is why we're here talking about it. Our district is 356 square miles. It's larger if you count the response area outside of our community services district. To serve this area, we have 22 strategically located fire apparatus, which all require ongoing maintenance, replacement schedules, and overhead. We have PPE training and insurance requirements for our volunteer crew, tools and equipment, infrastructure. They're all costly, they're all critical. We've expanded our prevention and community outreach. We've been working very closely with the prescribed burn associations and with the fire safe councils to help our community get more fire resilient. These obligations also include expenses. I'm very proud of my fire department's dedication to service and to my fire department's leadership's dedication to stewarding our agency responsibly. And I would just like to add that responsibility, that sense of stewardship and responsibility that Anderson Valley Fire Department and Community Services District brings to all of our decision-making would be extended most gratefully to the receipt of these tax funds. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Doug Hutchison, Fire Chief for the Ukiah Valley Fire Authority. I want to echo what Chief DeWitt just said. We would come out in support of the 3/8 cent sales tax for fire. While I appreciate the attempt for unity and maybe a compromise at 1/8, I'd like to remind the board that there's 22 different fire agencies that share in this throughout the county. So when you start whittling away at that amount, by the time you divide it up amongst the agencies, it doesn't really have a meaningful impact anymore. That's one of the reasons that we spent so much time discussing the formula last week. So we would support the 3/8 cent as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kyle Farmer. Angela is being way too modest. The Anderson Valley Fire Department is really what's making the Prescribed Burn Association move forward. They are like a fiscal sponsor for the PBA at this point. So they're kind of, right there in the middle of this county, the link between the coast and inland, and they're providing that leadership. I do think that linking fire and water is a really rational way to do this, and Mo did a brilliant job just making that happen really fast and utilizing pre-existing determinations in terms of the way she was able to build on things. So this wasn't just created out of nowhere. She was building on pre-existing work. That's what I think makes it work. But I do kind of want to bring up, when it comes to water, there's a lot of people who talk about hydrants. What we mostly have in this county are standpipes. We were doing with my volunteer fire department yesterday, we were doing a drive around to check on things. There's a lot of places where you'll have a tank and just low head flow from that tank as if it's going to be highly useful in a firefighting situation. That's the kind of stuff that happens in this kind of piecemeal 5,000 gallon tank at a time approach that it sounds like Mr. Jurdy is suggesting would solve some of these problems. These are big, big, big problems. These aren't kind of micro grant problems. These are, Sonoma County's water agency, I did the rough math, is 4% of their budget. Petaluma's water agency, I think, is 30% of their budget. And if you look at this county, I think the one of the biggest things that has held us back is thinking that we can deal with water one well at a time, one little plastic tank at a time. It really has to be a cohesive countywide approach if we're going to make it through to the other side of this. And, it might be that even more linkage between fire and water, it would be really great if we could tap into hydrants. That's what allows you to put out bigger fires. And as much as even Ukiah might have some paid fire departments, these days when there's a big fire, they're calling Zone 2 every time. There's Hopland, Redwood, and Potter Valley are showing up for Ukiah every single time. So we are all connected, not only through water, not only through the fire sheds, but also through our zone mutual aid systems in this county. So I really hope you guys try to fund these things. I like Ted's idea also of bringing in, sales tax is one thing, but it's kind of a ridiculous situation we've created in this county that we think that, a water agency is some sort of accessory unit outhouse we can have. It's the kitchen. It's the core of what makes life work is water. So thank you.
Afternoon. I'm Carolyn Schneider. I'm on the Citizens Library Initiative Committee and also on the Library Advisory Board. And as all these things are essential, it's like there's not enough for everybody. Probably the library petition will most likely get on the ballot for the 1/8 of a cent more than what we have now. And what we're hoping for, that there's only 1/8 or 2/8 that will go to fire or water or whatever combination the Board of Supervisors comes up with. I hate all these things pitted against each other. And this time, we got plenty of divisiveness and polarity in the whole world, and now it's right here. We're seeing it right here. But I'm hoping that you can look at it in a bigger picture. I want fire services. I have a big water tank. I have a well that almost ran dry. All these things are huge issues, and they're going to go on and on and on, so it's going to keep needing things. So I'm just saying, you've got to really look at it carefully and not use all of the sales tax either, because people they don't have enough money. They don't have enough money, and they're paying more sales tax if the 3/8 passes. If you do 2/8, then at least it's a stable amount, what it is right now. I just fear that the battle then is, if it's 3/8 and 1/8, and Fort Bragg's talking about a 3/8 cent tax, that then in November, nothing passes because people have had it. And so I just think it can be a dangerous moment right now, and I hope that you can resolve this in some way that no one gets everything they want or even need, but we all get something to move on. So, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn is the president of the Library Advisory Group, and she actually came out from Fort Bragg today. I'm Michelle Bisson-Savoy, and I'm the president of the Ukiah Valley Friends of the Library. What we would like to see you do is to go ahead with a sales tax that is dedicated to fire and to water, and that is limited to the 2/8 or 1/4. It's a great deal of money. It's like $7 million. I think that's a pretty big pie, and I think even if you slice it up, you can manage to make sure that everybody gets some. And what the libraries have put forward, we got our petitions in, is an eighth. It's not 3/8, it's not a half, it's 1/8. That leaves you with another quarter, 2/8, to really do something with. And you have an opportunity with fire, and you have an opportunity with water. And I really think you should kind of look at that as your solution. So thank you, and I do appreciate all the work you guys have put into it. And I know you're all very thoughtful about it, and I know these issues are very important to you, just like the library is very important to us. So thank you again.
Chair Williams, members of the board, Patrick Hickey, field representative with SEIU Local 1021. We want to be in a position where we can support this resolution, and certainly we don't want to be in a position where we have to oppose it. But many of our members have worked many, many hours collecting signatures throughout the county to make sure that our library system stays strong. And as some of the other folks have mentioned, and as I mentioned at a previous meeting, we want to work together. We want to figure out a way that we can move forward together. We also want to work for a proposal that we think has a good chance of actually succeeding. And I would have to agree with Supervisor Jurdy. If the county moves forward with the 3/8 cent sales tax, I suspect it'll go down in defeat. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Victor Husak on the Friends of the Library Board. I know a lot's been said about pros and cons of a general tax and it being in perpetuity. That can always be amended. But I would just like to address the fact that we wouldn't be having this debate, perhaps, if the board only requested 2/8 of the 3/8 that's in play. We have worked very hard getting signatures and telling people that if they voted for this additional 1/8 of the 3/8 in play, there would be no tax increase. So again, if there were 2/8 in the board's potential fire and or water proposal, we could honestly say to the voters, there would be no tax increase. So I would hope that the board would consider that so that both potentially could pass. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Guinness McFadden. I wrote an open letter to Supervisor Jurdy, and having listened to him today, I don't think it would serve any purpose to stir that water up anymore. So I'm not going to say my first paragraph or my second one, which disabuses him of some misconceptions on how the Potter Valley Irrigation District works. I invite him to get in touch with me at 621-2311 anytime he wants. I know Dan, he knows me. I've always respected him. He does his homework. And a lot of what he said in his memo the other day made sense about timing and the way to do it. But there are some paragraphs I'd like to read if I have the time. This is to Supervisor Jurdy. Last week on June 15th, during a discussion of the medical system in the county, you remarked that when there's a problem in one part of Mendocino County, it's a problem for all the county. I would hope that attitude on your part would spill over to this water issue. I'm reminded of last summer when the coast was hurting for water. Trucks left the inland valleys carrying needed water supply to our neighbors on the coast. This water issue is county-wide. Besides Potter Valley, Ukiah Valley, Hopland, Northern Sonoma County, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa, and Marin County, one way or another, rely on this water. We've been abandoned by our Congressman Huffman, who recently implored the Federal Energy Regulation Committee to expedite retiring the Potter Valley project without confirming the reliability of water supply to the Russian River interests, thereby putting to lie this so-called two-basin solution. We in the Russian River Basin are alone at the moment. Regardless of the outcome of the upcoming vote and an added 1/4 or 3/8 tax, it is important to put aside narrow interests and think of the good for the entire region, a good that is being attacked by smart, well-funded, and relentless forces who want to completely eliminate the Potter Valley project. To use Supervisor Mulherne's favorite word, this is a conversation, that's the word. A conversation that I think has been long to come, and serious conversation, because this is an issue that is very, very important. Now, Supervisor Jurdy has his feelings about whether it's worth for the coast to support something that he says will only help the inland valleys, but that's a binary choice that's a false one. And I appreciate you listening to me. Anybody wants to know how the Potter Valley project works, I'm happy to tell them what I can and how it's been working for 100 years.
Thank you. Let's go to online comment, starting with South Coast Fire. You're muted.
Good afternoon. Can you folks hear me?
Now
Yes.
we can.
Okay. Kevin Callahan, Treasurer, South Coast Fire Protection District. I wanted to make Supervisor Gurgey and Haschek acutely aware that we are in the 11th hour of a crisis here on the South Coast. Supervisor Mulhern had an opportunity to do a lot of collaborative work with all of the agencies to come up with a concise and comprehensive plan to address something that is in our forefront right now. The South Coast Fire Protection District is running on fumes at times. We've had to take out loans in order to keep responding. Our insurance has gone up over 240% in the last year. Our fuel prices, as you well know, are through the roof. Our crews are aging. Our apparatus and infrastructure is aging, as are a lot of the volunteer fire departments. And if we don't do something now, we're going to pay a price later, and not much later, very soon. I'm sure you're aware of the fire we had just a few weeks ago up near Point Arena, and the board dug into its pockets and purchased a bulldozer and a tractor, which ultimately saved that fire from spreading. A perfect example of how, if we can get some funding from you folks, we continue to do the good work on an unpaid basis. to hear this can being kicked down the road is, as Supervisor Gurgey so succinctly puts, offensive. I, as a private citizen, not as a board member, but as a private citizen, find it offensive that we can't put our best foot forward and take care of our volunteers. Thank you.
Next, we have David Roderick.
David, you can begin when you're ready. It looks like your microphone has no audio coming through.
Perhaps we can come back to David. Next, we have Ed O'Brien.
I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm speaking as Ed O'Brien, not as any board member, past or present, firefighter or such, but I encourage you to do the best you can to put the full 3/8 on the ballot. I think supplying some of my neighboring fire departments is really, really important. I drive through their area. My family drives through their area. We all have to be safe. The one thing that bothered me about the supervisor from the 4th District said, when he was saying we make choices as to where we live, and that's a fact. And I made a choice here in Mendocino, and I'm still happy with it. But we're not in control of things here in Mendocino. As you know, the Board of Supervisors is our favorite form of government. And basically in the 70s, when the town of Mendocino was granted by the federal and the state government a sewer system, the Board of Supervisors, directly after that, approved an explosion of new B&Bs all over town. There was no consideration about how much water they would use. These were basically single-family dwellings that had supplied enough water for a family, and now they were supplying water for 4 units, 5 units, 6 units, and hot tubs, whatever was on there. So I understand how it seems like Potter Valley is going to get all the water. I understand the argument about it's not going to be coming to the coast. But the inland area did supply us some very important water during the last one. And I believe it just, it's not the way to do it. We are working on our own watering systems to save water and to try to have it for when people actually need it. But I just don't think that it's a good thing to say that people make their choices as to where they live. We made our choice, and I know where the library is, and I know where the local library is, and I don't want to be competing with them, but I think you do have to prioritize life safety and life supporting water. So I thank you very much for your time.
Valerie?
I hope I can start this. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. First of all, I do want to, I am the chair of the Anderson Valley Community Service District, and probably 90% of what we do is run a fire EMS for the valley and the surrounding areas. And we want to express that we support the sales tax for the fire. I have to say, listening to you, that I don't have an answer for how you're going to figure out water. I mean, water and fire, either versus or combined. So I don't really have an answer for that. But I do want to give you 3 quick thoughts. One is that Anderson Valley is happy to provide you with a needs assessment for funds. So we could work on that. The second thing is that we merged our EMS department brought it underneath the Anderson Valley Fire Department roof to strengthen our rural EMS services in 2017. But in recent years, the dwindling EMS revenues have required the fire department funding to be moved from the fire branch of the fire department to keep EMS transport services in place. And we did that by shifting the TOT funding over. So this new funding, the sales tax funding, would definitely backfill that gap. The last thing is that in 2017, I hope you remember that the fire districts worked with former Sheriff Tom Allman and supported Measure B, that the mental health measure, to not compete at that time for a sales tax for fire. The plan was to have the fire departments seek the sunsetting 3/8% portion once it became available. And this is where we are today. So we're sticking to the plan, which has been well known for over 5 years. Thank you very much.
Peter?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I have a few observations that I'd like to share with the board. One is taxes are one of those issues where it's really important that the community have a consensus about what it wants to do because it has a massive impact and it cuts across all the sectors in the county. And frankly, this discussion just has not risen to the level in the community where a consensus can be said to exist about what an appropriate solution is. I suspect that we all would agree in a very high level general sense that there's a problem with fire funding and a problem with water funding. That isn't in dispute, but simply throwing a solution at the problem and saying that because of time, we have to embrace that solution and make it the one that we embed in our government is a hugely wrong mistake. And I would argue that, especially in a time when consumers are facing the pressures of rising inflation, it's hitting hard on their pocketbooks. And I think it's important to point out that one of the reasons why our fire districts are aging is because the demographics of the county have changed. And we have an older retired population, but they're also a population that has fixed incomes and from which sales taxes have a particularly vicious bite. So I have to say that I don't represent fire districts. I don't represent water districts. I just represent a retiree on a fixed income. And I have to say that, in my opinion, this is a solution in search of justification. And we really should, as a community, be able to come together with a solid justification for what we're going to do. Not just that we have a problem, but this is the best and most doable solution to the problem. And I don't see that, and I would communicate that to your board in regard to the increase in the sales tax. Thank you.
Devin?
Good afternoon, board. Devin Bohr, Executive Director, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. And there's been several good points brought up in the dialogue this afternoon. There's still several concerns that I wanted to bring forward. First, this became contentious pretty quickly, I would say, and that's unfortunate to the fact that, this is a county-wide issue and it shouldn't be one district pitted against the other. In terms of some of the comments specific to water, which is what I know the best, for possibly 5 districts. It's hard to tell with the redistricting on the bottom of the 5th on the southeast side if it touches the Russian River watershed. But for sure, 4 are directly involved with the operation of the Potter Valley project. Speaking as an individual to the 5th district where I live, my water that comes to my residence is 100% dependent upon water supply from Lake Mendocino, which is therefore connected to the Potter Valley project. So this is not just an agricultural consideration. This is a broader base. So I wanted to reiterate that once again. And I guess my concern and frustration that I always try to hold back when it comes to the county dealing with water issues is just like some of the previous commenters mentioned, there hasn't really been any solution. It's reactionary and it's not looking at the bigger picture. We have significant issues in all areas of the county when it comes to water, and they're coming to a head after 3 years of drought. Plus we have, the bigger, broader pictures of looking at long-term infrastructure and where the water supply is going to be coming from. To connect it to fire, for example, the same water district that has a fire hydrant right in front of my house will be pretty moot if they don't have a water supply to provide to that. The 2 largest fires we've had, number 1 and number 3 in state history, were inland. Both of those fires were highly dependent upon water supply provided from Lake Pillsbury, Lake Mendocino, agricultural water storage ponds, and all the supporting districts. So there is a connection between water and fire. And think about all the resources and the time that this board spent post-2017 working on fire recovery. That wasn't limited to the 1st district. That was a conversation that happened countywide. So please look at this as a broader picture. And it is a solution. Maybe it's not the solution, but I do applaud Supervisor Mulhern for at least bringing a solution forward for consideration. So thank you.
Anna?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is just so frustrating. It's already so hard for most people to live here. You guys have a budget. You need to learn how to manage it. And you always go for the easy answer, which is to tax people here. And that is just wrong. Everybody here is already struggling. And now you want to add the burden to the people who are trying to get by day to day. I've already had, Dan, we have disagreed. Dan, we have disagreed on some issues, but I am totally agreeing with you on this one. And Ted, we have agreed on some issues, but I'm completely disagreeing with you on this. You can't just keep strapping taxes on the backs of the people who live here because you can't manage a budget. I agree with the previous speaker about the reactionary Sorry, I'm having trouble here with my internet. I agree with the previous speaker with the reactionary actions of the Board of Supervisors instead of getting in front of all of the issues in the first place. And I'm willing to do my part to work with the Board of Supervisors, as you know, because we have met in person. But you can't just keep not dealing with things and then say, oh, well, let's just tax it and, screw over our constituents that are already just trying to hang on as it is. Sorry, that was kind of off the cuff because I didn't have those comments prepared, but I guess that's the gist of it.
Ron?
Thank you, Chair Williams, and I really appreciate you steering this conversation and trying to get a board to come to fix a solution. We know that our water issues aren't going to magically get better, and if they do, we may come in a different cycle. And this looks back to when the dam was being built. And it was, we can't afford it. And now we're at a part to where it might have been cheaper to do it then. So I think that we really need to be not just looking at where we're at now, but where things are going. And that's going to be a really important thing is of looking back in history, how when a previous issue was brought up, I personally feel that the county made the wrong decision back then. And I hope they don't make another wrong decision going forward. Thank you.
Phone number ending in 2452. Please state your name for the record.
You could press *6 on your phone to unmute.
You're unmuted.
Let's try Dave Roderick one last time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that new computer. Just a bit of history here. On the May 17 board meeting, Supervisor Jury lamented that a citizens group wasn't coming forward to present this tax. And I need to remind Dan perhaps that a citizen group did try to bring a fire tax to the county in 2015, for which our group, me included, were immediately sued to stop us, sued personally. And that whole unfortunate event spurred a letter dated May 26th of 2016 that Dan Jurdy wrote to the board and to the Fire Association outlining next steps, identifying the $3 to $10 million in unfunded benefit that the county received from fire districts, and that he's recommended that the board put forward a fire tax for fire. I sent a copy of that letter again to Chairman Williams here during today's meeting, so you have that for the record. My position is this isn't so much a fire tax as it is a emergency medical services tax, EMS. That is the liability that the county truly has financially by state law. So I don't really care how it's funded. Tax, no tax. I think the most efficient way to resolve the problem and be more equitable to the other initiative people would be to just reallocate the public safety budget that's currently existing. Law enforcement receives 99.5% of the public safety budget. I think it would be reasonable to look at that allocation and perhaps rethink that. And you could do so without raising taxes. That's going to cause pain in other sectors of our public service providers. But I think now is the time to do it. And otherwise, we're going to continue to have these same conversations, these same meetings that go nowhere. Here we are 7 years down the road from Mr. Jurdy's letter, and nothing's changed. So it's got to change, and we're out of time. So these academic discussions about taking our time and slowing down and reevaluating, I think those days are long gone. And the board has to act, and they need to act right away.
Phone number ending in 2831.
Hi, this is Jenny Shattuck from the coast. Just a couple things that come to mind. When I've talked to people, they say they support the libraries, but they don't want our taxes to go up. So I'm wondering if limiting it to the 2/8 and also maybe allocating some of the TOT money. We're constantly asking tourists to come here, and as someone who lives near Highway 1, there's constant ambulances, cliff rescues, cars, motorcycles. It's a lot of tourists. So we're inviting them here, and then our resources are being used for them to rescue them. Our ambulances, our hospitals. In fact, I had a family member in the hospital who couldn't get flown out because the ambulance and helicopter were helping people that were in accidents that were visiting here. So I'm just wondering if the TOT could be somehow allocated towards that. And if this wasn't in the general fund, I think that would make people support it more. That's all. Thank you.
Phone number ending in 3245.
Good afternoon. It's Michael Reese, Chief with the Albion Little River Fire Protection District. I'm calling in to say that we support the full 3/8 allocation, and I just want to speak to the fact that I'm not sure everyone in the county realizes how on the brink our medium, small volunteer fire departments are. We all incur the same costs as the big ones. An engine costs the same, our stations cost the same, our personnel costs the same, and we need as much help as we can get, and we need to do it swiftly. We've had increases in our revenue in the past few years, and that's helped, but we need more, and we need it as soon as possible. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I want to reiterate, is just that, we're one call. We're basically, you could be a phone call away, a 911 phone call away from nobody being home. Response numbers are low. We're, as far as volunteers, and the call volumes are going up, and we need as much help as we can get. That's all I got. Thank you.
That concludes online public comment. Any additional comment from the room? No, it's back to the board. Supervisor Mulhern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't wake up one day and decide that there should be a sales tax for fire and water. I've been a board of supervisor for a year and a half. I served on the Ukiah City Council for 6 years. I was born and raised in this community, and I think I have a very clear understanding of some of our very pressing and imminent issues. I want to address the difference between 1/8, 2/8, and 3/8, and what that could do for our fire departments and countywide water projects. 1/8 is simply not enough money to do anything with. I did consider and speak with people about 2/8 and whether or not that would be something that would work, and overwhelmingly that also would not be enough. I understand that there is a concern about competing from the library initiative, because they're also asking for an increase of 1/8 of a cent to go to libraries, making it a full 1/4 of a cent for libraries. That the tax math is complicated, and I by no means think that this is going to be an easy sales tax to get passed. At the same time, for me as a leader to sit in this seat and pretend like I did everything that I could to try to help our fire service and our water needs, and walk away without trying to get the full 3/8 of a cent for this fire and water measure, I would not be serving my community in any way that I would be proud of. I did speak with the fire districts. We were able to come up with an allocation plan based on the 3/8 of a cent. Regarding water, I don't understand exactly the inland versus coastal, this rhetoric about the Potter Valley project and this sort of manufactured battle. I don't understand it. The plan that I've brought forward has initially, I had drafted a 5 to 10 year financial plan countywide developed by this technical advisory group based on feedback. If you read my updated proposal, it did say a minimum of 5-year outlook so that those funds could be balanced countywide based on the recommendations from water technical experts throughout the county. The really important part is that it would come before the board in a public meeting every year to be voted on before the budget was approved. And I think, certainly that would be an opportunity for the public and any member of the Board of Supervisors from a potential district that felt that they were not receiving adequate funds to be able to speak up and make sure that that wasn't the case. I don't anticipate that to be the case because the makeup of the body would be sufficient enough to make sure that those funds were spread and that the allocations were balanced over a 5-year plus plan. This kind of board, this kind of technical advisory committee, it works for Sonoma Clean Power, for the Russian River Watershed Association. Again, I didn't wake up one day and just make something up. This proposal includes means that governments have used over decades to be able to handle complicated countywide and regional issues. So I just want to be clear that I'm happy to accept feedback for the proposal that I've provided. I didn't wake up one day and just decide to do this. This is, years of understanding the problems that our community faces and really trying to figure out how to be able to move forward, especially in the middle of this climate disaster. I do want to say, I, as a citizen of Ukiah, have seen the great work and dedication that the Friends of Library of Ukiah have done, that the staff at the Ukiah Library have been able to provide community events for our children, for our entire community, the 8-cent Measure A sales tax, and I applaud them for their efforts and for all of their work. I also understand and know as a supervisor that this county has many, many capital needs that we cannot fund. So I do support the library's ballot initiative, and I have actually signed the initiative and would support it. If the signatures are all checked and it does make it to the ballot, I'm certainly happy to support both a fire and water measure and a library measure. And if it makes anybody feel better, I'm happy to say, I am asking for an 1/8 of an increase for fire and water. But again, the sales tax math isn't the most important part of this conversation. The most important part is how can we fund the fire resources that our community so desperately needs and relies on, and provide adequate countywide water resources. We're in year 3 of a drought. I don't expect that to go away anytime soon. Certainly, if it does, I will be the first one to put it on a ballot initiative to have this sales tax repealed.
So I would like to recognize Supervisor Mulhern for her work putting a plan together. For water, it's the only specific plan that has come forward. And there's a lot of debate about what the perfect plan is. If it weren't for the climate and being 3 years into a drought, I think this board would work on the perfect plan. We would take our time. We would have stakeholder meetings. We would try to envision what had the highest success of both passing and being effective. We're not in control of the climate. We have towns that may go dry. We're 3 years in now. What happens when we're 5 years in? We find this is the new norm. California has a water crisis. We have a water security problem. So I'm not looking for the perfect plan. I'm looking for incremental steps to make progress. And at the same time, if we have one or two supervisors against this, I think there's a good chance it'll sink. And so I guess speaking to McGordy and Mulhern, if you can't convince Supervisor Jurdy to get behind this, or at least be impartial, I worry about tying water to fire. Because I go to fire calls still, and I look at people who are wondering, will they survive? Or will their family member survive? Can they get to definitive care quick enough? That's one of the most important things we do in this county, or in some cases, maybe we don't do. We don't fund it. And the model of just expecting people to show up for free and train for free, it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. We have fire telling us that. They've been telling us for years. We probably all know somebody who's been saved as the result of a volunteer firefighter showing up at the right time. That may not be the case going forward. We have departments telling us they have a low turnout. They may have 2 or 3 people. They may have 1, and that's going to get worse and worse. So if I had to choose between a combined water and fire with one supervisor actively campaigning to make it fail, or just fire, I would probably choose fire at this point, because at least we check off one critical problem. We still have towns that may go dry, and you could say Fort Bragg doesn't have a water problem. Maybe it doesn't. We all choose where we live. Well, there are 100,000 people living in this county. What do you do when their town goes dry, or their economy goes dry as the result of water? Whether it's ag or it's tourism, it's a countywide problem. We have 100,000 people, and if it's okay with the clerk, I'd like to pull up one slide. Over the weekend, I was looking at our discretionary revenue, and that's the blue line. You can see it's been increasing over time, and then I adjusted it into buying power, real terms. Going back to 2007, we have about the same amount of buying power. It hasn't moved, and yet we have new problems. We have firefighters working for free, probably not as a long-term viable option. We have drought. We have unfunded mandates. I mean, the state shows up with unfunded mandates all the time. Look at the one about the green waste. And we don't, unless we have an additional revenue source, I don't know how we're going to solve the new problems that arrive. We've talked about how the budgeting process wasn't great. We had staff, but really as a county, we identified the museum and parks as places to chop. Not because anybody wants to chop those, but because we told staff, focus on mandates and public safety first. And they did. And the only thing in this county that wasn't a mandate or public safety was the museum and the parks. That's a sad state. We need to be bringing in more revenue. So long-winded way to say I'm looking back at my colleagues hoping there's some unity. If I have to make a recommendation at this point, after everything I've heard from supervisors and the public and fire, I would suggest a 1/4 fire tax. It would check off one problem that we have. And it wouldn't increase the sales tax. And I don't think Supervisor Jurdy would campaign against it because it is a credible plan. It would be supporting the existing 21 local fire agencies using an allocation formula approved by the local fire agencies. Not that I don't think water is important, but I don't want to lose everything. Supervisor Mulhern.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Williams. I definitely also thought about and considered that. At a very recent meeting, a supervisor actually suggested that we remove some fire funding for a different use. And I think that this plan does a great job at addressing our fire needs. I don't think that, I think that by having water and fire together, it provides more of collaborative approaches for future boards of supervisors. So if something changes across the state of California and our fire departments are adequately funded, I don't want a future board to try to use the tax for something else. I think that by having water and the 4 incorporated cities plus the water districts all paying attention to how this money is being used is really what provides the accountability for future boards. So I believe that they need to be tied together and that it needs to be 3/8.
Supervisor Haschek.
I call the question.
Well, we can do that. Roll call vote.
Just to clarify before I take the roll, the motion on the floor is direct staff to proceed with drafting an ordinance for a 1/8 cent sales tax for submission to the voters dedicated to the fire agencies. Supervisor McGorty?
No.
Supervisor Mulhern?
No.
Supervisor Haschak?
Yes.
Supervisor Jurdy?
Yes.
And Chair Williams?
No.
Motion fails with Supervisors McGorty, Mulhern, and Williams dissenting.
Supervisor Jurdy.
Yeah, Chair Williams. I am concerned that if there's not a tax decrease, there's in 2023 that we're going to get some people voting against one or more taxes. But in the spirit of trying to reach consensus, because we all do share the goal of improving and helping improve our fire resiliency and wildfire prevention programs, I would like to point out to the board that the proposal that the fire districts recommended at 60% of the 3/8 cent, it equals, if you do the math, it equals 90% of a 1/4 cent sales tax. So, and to simplify it, look at a 3/8 as being 6 million, it may well be more. And look at a 1/4 cent being 4 million, it may well be more. So either way you get out of that 6 million, 60% of 6 million is 3.6, 90% of 4 million is 3.6. And my point there is, when I've talked with people about a fire tax, one of the things they want to see is what we heard from the Anderson Valley Fire Department about how they're working with the Fire Safe Council to help community members harden their homes and protect their homes, create that clearing space so that when firefighters do have to come to their site, they've got a home that they can actually save. You know, if someone doesn't adequately provide fire clearance around their house, it's almost impossible in a major wildfire for the fire department to save that house. I mean, they have to actually, we've heard that in major wildfires, they've had to actually make decisions. Which house on this block can I make a stand and save? And the work of the Fire Safe Council with homeowners has increased the numbers of houses in this county that are savable and can be protected by the fire departments. So what I'm getting at is, again, I think there's an interest in making sure that if we were to have a reliable funding for fire departments and for wildfire safety and homeowner protections, that we could have a 1/4 cent sales tax. Again, we're pushing it whether the voters will approve this, but a 1/4 cent sales tax on the ballot with 90% going to the fire departments exactly with the formula proposed and with the same amounts, with that extra 10% going to wildfire protection programs. And, you know, we could specify they're for defensible space and fire resistant structure evaluations, vegetation management, fuel reductions, and grant programs and education to homeowners and property owners. I think that kind of a balanced approach where 10% would be set aside for those types of programs, most likely administered by the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council. We have over, I think, 47 fire safe community districts not districts, but fire safe councils, regional fire safe councils in the county that are working together with the countywide fire safe council. I think that kind of balanced approach with a 1/4 cent sales tax would be very appealing to people. Again, and then the final point is, I think the public does not want to see a sales tax that is just a general fund sales tax with just a resolution, a non-binding statement by the board saying how the money is spent. So I think it should be guaranteed how the money will be spent. And if the board doesn't want to go there, I think the only way around that to assure the voters that the money, there won't be, as I said before, any hanky-panky how the money is being spent, is for it to be a short-term sales tax. So I think we make the choice. Is it a short-term sales tax where the voters would have to renew it? Or do we propose a guarantee to the voters? And I think the voters would respond positively with a guarantee of how these funds were spent. So that's how I think we could come together with a united board and with a united community behind a tax that they would see direct benefit from and has a pathway to passage in November.
Dan, one of the things I like about that is we have rural communities across the county finding that it's difficult to maintain homeowners insurance. Also makes it very difficult to have a long-term rental because that needs to be insured with a different policy than a primary residence. And some of that is just based on fire severity map and the realistic possibility that a structure fire will be a total loss. And I think the defensible space clearing adds to the insurability, just like strengthening fire departments. So I think you have a good idea with the 90-10 split. Supervisor Mulhern.
Sure. My question is this proposed to be a specific tax requiring 66% of the vote?
I would propose it being a specific tax guaranteeing to the voters how the money is being spent. I think the voters would respond positively if there's a guarantee.
Supervisor Mulhern?
Sure. Napa's fire sales tax that included fire prevention just failed. And so, again, I think we have a very urgent situation with fire and water on our hands currently, and I do not support trying to get a specific tax.
Supervisor McGordy.
Yeah, I just, I couldn't support something that doesn't include something for water. I'm sorry. You may think it's silly, but it's not silly. It's extraordinary what we're facing. I think Mr. McFadden summed it up very greatly about the uphill battle that we are facing, trying to maintain the water right we have inside of the Russian, plus addressing the water insecurity in their coastal communities. It's not trivial. I've spent the last year and a half dealing with this, with the water ad hoc and hearing from everybody around the county who's so concerned about what's happening. If there's some way to at least put some sort of water resources into this, I'd consider it. But you can't come up empty-handed on this, at least from my perspective. In good conscience, I can't sit here as a supervisor trying to provide leadership for our county on important issues and say, not really not that important. We'll just wait. That's not what's going on right now. And I look at the city of Ukiah as a good example. 2015, they went through the drought, realizing their water insecurity. Fortunately, they have a staff and they're funded better for infrastructure. And they started designing their program for resiliency. And in the process, they brought on 3 new wells. They created a purple pipe program, and their water situation is 100% better than it was in 2015, where they were wondering if they were going to be able to provide enough water for the city of Ukiah. So I know that there is a pathway, and we have to take advantage of the the funding opportunities that are here. They don't happen by themselves. I think we have as good a motivated group of volunteers working on everything in this county, from fire to water, but we need a boost. We can't continue just to get by on next to nothing to make this happen. You and I, Supervisor Jury, don't seem to see this same way on this, but that's kind of my position.
So, Glenn, I want to have a discussion about this because I can't talk to any of you outside of this meeting, and so I apologize to the public, but this is the opportunity. I agree that we have a water security crisis. We're not doing enough, and unless we throw money at it, we likely will find ourselves in a position with insufficient water. But it doesn't matter if we get 3 votes today to put this on the ballot if it doesn't pass. Unless you can convince Supervisor Jurdy to get behind it, I think it'll sink. I mean, I've already heard him on the radio. I've read his pieces on social media. This won't pass if you have one supervisor actively campaigning against it. It doesn't matter how good of an idea it is. It doesn't matter how real the water crisis is. I think it'll sink. And if we sink fire and water together, we haven't solved anything. So, I would rather address water and fire together. If we could come out of this meeting with all 5 finding some unity to do that, great. But if we come out with that plan and it's a split vote and we have 1 or more supervisors actively campaigning against, I don't see it being a good outcome. So I hope you think seriously. And I mean, this is a chance for you and Dan to hash it out and see if you can come to an agreement. Supervisor Mulhern.
I appreciate that Supervisor Jurdy is passionate, and I heard his radio interview as well. He's very much launched into an oppositional campaign. I think that this is too important, and we have to let the voters decide. I am sorry if we cannot get to a consensus, but if this board votes to put it up onto the ballot, then it is up to individuals in our community, coastal communities that are struggling with water, our fire departments, our inland water resources to wage that campaign against the opposition. My role as a leader and as a supervisor is to say, hey, voters, do you want to do this or not? And that's all I'm asking. I just want to put it on the ballot. And if the voters don't want to do it, then okay, asked and answered, then we know.
Well, unfortunately, that may put us in a position where we're not giving a good response to emergency calls. And we can say, well, the voters didn't pass it, but we don't know, did they not pass it because they thought it was all about Potter Valley water? What do you think about splitting it out? Stick with your 3/8. 1/4 for fire and a separate ballot item, 1/8 for water. You get the overall funding, but if one fails, the other may still pass.
Yep, I've considered that as well. And my response is that they need to be together to hold future boards of supervisors accountable. If, we're talking about this TOT money that previously we didn't have a tourism economy. And this money has built up so where we do have a tourism economy, and the first thing is, oh, well, we can have some of that back then. So if we have fire receiving funding and they appear to be doing well, my concern is that that money will be taken away. So again, if you have the water plan with the 4 cities and the district members plus fire all watching this money and watching what future boards of supervisors do, that's where our accountability is. I'm not concerned about me not voting for fire. I understand the needs. I'm not concerned about me not voting for water. I understand the needs. 10 years from now, when maybe we're not in a 3-year drought and that looks convenient for somebody to use for something else, then that is why there needs to be this accountability of having both of the projects together.
Supervisor Haschek.
One of the big issues is whether it's a dedicated tax or a general fund tax. And I think that that's something we need to grapple with, and the other is the limited scope. I think that if we put on a number of years, that would help. Because right now, if we put on a general tax for 3/8%, I don't believe it would pass. And I don't believe that the people, even though they would say, yeah, we need it for fire, and I think that we would have more likelihood of passing it if it's dedicated, because I don't believe that the people would have the faith in the board to really follow through over the years. So that's why I'd say it needs to be 5 or 7 years, and we should probably go for the 2/3 vote, where it's really set in stone.
Supervisor Mulhern.
Sure, my concern with that is the libraries went after an 1/8 of a cent sales tax for 20 years. That was supposed to sunset. And now we're back, and they need an additional 1/8 of a cent, plus don't want the tax to sunset. I don't want to be in that same position. I don't think that fire and water resources are going to get any easier in 10 years. I've definitely thought about that too.
Well, and I think that the people will realize that, and if people don't realize it, then we're in bad shape.
If I can, I think, what we're talking about here is a new tax for a new purpose. It's either a dedicated guaranteed tax for a guaranteed purpose, or it's a guaranteed tax for a promised purpose. And so I think we need to recognize that when the citizens put, when the library tax was first put on the ballot and passed, it was a new sales tax at that time. And I think the reason it sunsetted, was set to sunset, was to prove to the voters, give the county library system a chance to prove itself. And now the library supporters have gone out with their belief that we were all supporting them to collect signatures to get this on the ballot for November, to renew it, but make it permanent now that they've had a chance to prove themselves. And I think when we're talking about a new tax, we have a burden to prove to the public that the money is being well spent. And so my preference is for a guaranteed tax. If we went for up to 1/4 cent for fire, we could, it would be time limited, as Supervisor Hashek said, 5-7 years, something like that. And that would, I think, force guardrails on this board and future boards to spend the money as promised, or there'd be no chance of the tax being renewed at that time.
Supervisor Mulhern.
Mr. Chair, you are probably the one on the board with the most fire experience. So if a fire department is reviewing their budget and looking at maybe increasing staffing or buying equipment, what happens 7 years from now when they've had that money in their budget and then it's not voted for again?
Well, if it's not a guarantee, I would think long-term planning would be hard. I mean, they may be able to save up a few years and buy an engine, but they're not going to be able to plan to pay, say, a duty officer around the clock because they don't know if they'll have funding after that 7th year. I think that may put more strain on fire. Not that the funds in the interim wouldn't be a good idea, but I don't think it's the best idea. But I do understand Dan's point. If you don't put some guardrails on this, will voters support it? I don't know. I guess I'm thinking that I could put 8 5,000-gallon water tanks in my front yard, right? An individual, it's inconvenient. Not everybody has the resources to do it tomorrow, but an individual can take care of their water needs in a rural environment. You can't really take care of your traffic collision or your mega fire on your own. So again, if I had to choose between these two, fire is, one of those where people don't really think about it or prioritize it until they call 911, and then they wonder, where's the ambulance? Where are the firefighters? And that's why it's hard to get people to stand in front of the post office and collect signatures, because the people who benefit are the ones who don't know tomorrow they will need to call 911. And I guess it means I need to be out there collecting signatures. So I'm looking for compromise. I see Supervisor Georgie is trying to compromise. I appreciate that. McGordy and Mulhern, can you come close to Dan's proposal?
We need the water and the fire resources. I'm amenable to putting a time limit on it.
What if we were to address fire through the sales tax at the quarter. Seems like Supervisor Jurdy is open to that. And reallocate some of our discretionary budget to address the water problem. And I know that means hard decisions and cuts in other services that we all care about. But if water is truly one of those top 3 priorities, maybe now is the time. McGordy.
I want to come away empty-handed from this, not having addressed the issue. I think you've made a pretty compelling argument for the importance of fire and the fire safe councils that do wonderful work. We like in typical Mendocino fashion, we find ways to cobble it together. And we just recently got a fire safe grant to look at a variety of things, including emergency egress through East Hills. So we're all thinking the same. God, we're not enemies here, and I'm disappointed that we're so far apart, especially Supervisor Jurdy. I'm surprised, because he drives through the county. I know he knows it's dry. I'm surprised he's not a little bit more concerned about his neighbors to the south of him. So if worse comes to worse here, and we can at least walk out with some resources that are definitely dedicated to address water issues so that we're not empty-handed, I would consider that. Otherwise, I'm pretty much in agreement with Supervisor McGurn that they're really like parents. They really are so critically important for communities that I would really prefer to let the voters decide on it.
Supervisor Haschek.
My question is for the interim CEO. What has the board dedicated for the standing up the water agency for this coming year?
Darcy Antle, interim CEO. It was $250,000 that you moved from reserve for local match for waters. So you had 960 set aside, but you took 250,000 and put it towards the water agency.
Okay, and so for the rest of the board, Supervisor McGordy and I have been in discussions, and we're still trying to figure out a model of how to use that money to stand up a water agency, to do a lot of these grant writing and support for the different water agencies of the county. And so we should have that proposal back, I don't know, in September?
I believe that's what Howard mentioned.
Yeah. Okay, and working with Howard DeShiel from the Department of Transportation, who is our water agency person, along with Amber Fissette.
County Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've been trying to find a moment here where I don't interrupt what I think is a very important conversation, but I do just want to make sure that I'm clear. If the board decides to move to a special tax, I do think we're going to need to revisit the issue of the allocation formula. Because the board was going with a non-binding resolution with respect to the allocation between the individual districts. We've sidestepped what is a potentially very thorny issue in terms of how would you sort of legally structure something governing the allocation between individual districts when that is so subject to change, right? Specifically that you'd have a lot of potential shift, districts merging, districts dissolving, districts being added, districts from outside of the county potentially coming in, or, I wouldn't put it beyond the realm of possibility that the state could sort of fundamentally shift how fire services are provided statewide. I just want to make sure that I identify that issue and suggest that if the board does decide to go that way, and I understand you haven't made up your minds yet, you would leave me a little bit of room to propose some language to you that would give some flexibility while still maintaining the fundamental basic purpose. But there were some mentions about the allocation formula being more or less set in stone, and I want to be candid with the board that I think that would be very difficult, and I'm not certain we'd be able to do quite that specific.
Appreciate that. I think I hear good arguments in both directions, but I think that pushes me into the general tax of 50% plus one, because I don't think we're going to be able to architect all of that language in time for districts coming and going. And what about Whale Gulch, and how does Westport fit in? I think we need some flexibility.
Chair Williams?
Yeah.
So again, if there was a general tax, I think the only way to get voter confidence is to limit the time. And I know it does create budgeting issues for each of the departments to some extent, but this is one what I'm going to call their three big funding. Actually, this would be one of their four big funding sources. So all the departments have a parcel tax, except for Whale Gulch and Westport. Those are departments, not districts. Every other, they all have, so essentially they all have parcel taxes. They all have, their share of the 172 funds coming from the county. They have their share from the county of the campground tax. And then they would have this other source. So, every agency has some variability in their revenues from year to year, just like any business or any individual. But I think the departments, at least the ones I've talked to, I think could manage this. And again, what I actually see happening is the public would, I have confidence that the public would see the money spent wisely, and they would see the results, and that they would then renew the tax in a dedicated tax, most likely without a time limit at that point. But if the concern is that this being a new tax needs to go with a 50% plus one, I think it needs to be time limited for a fairly short period of time, 6 or 8 years, somewhere in that range. And let the tax proceeds prove to the voters that it was a good use of funds, so that it could be renewed later.
I think that has merit. It's not without problems, but I think it's a fair compromise. Dan, can you think of any way to include some aspect of water? And I'm like Dave Roderick, I'm not concerned whether it's from this new tax or it's general fund, but I would sure like to walk away today with Supervisors Mulhern and McGordy feeling like some amount of funding has been dedicated to water solutions. And frankly, I'm concerned as well. They brought it up earlier, but Wallala, South Coast needs more housing. There's a moratorium. You can't really build because of the lack of water. Point Arena has a private water company. Hopefully it has long-term viability. Town of Mendocino, we're well aware, it runs dry. And last year, hauling it from Ukiah, that was before this fuel increase. It's not a viable long-term plan. And if that hauling stops, which I think it will, the county can't pay for it and the state won't long-term, we could lose $2 to $3 million of county revenue from the TOT. So I understand not wanting to make hard decisions and allocate money to water, because today we don't. But if we don't do it, we may find we lose far more in revenue, and that's just one part of the county. So back to what I'm looking for compromise, and I think we're close. What can you offer that Supervisor McGordy and Mulhern may feel is a fair compromise to address water?
Well, I mean, I definitely want to see us, tackle the water problems in our county. And I think Supervisor McGordy and Supervisor Hashak and everybody on the board working with our county staff did a tremendous job last year. And I don't want it to say, okay, pat ourselves on the back, that's enough. I'm not saying that. I have pointed out the one example that I gave where, in my mind, there's no consequence to it if we reduced our contribution to Visit Mendocino, which is increasing their marketing budget by 92% this year by $350,000. I think that could be a decision the board makes next year. But in the meantime, maybe what we could do is we could agree that we'll have a workshop dedicated to the issue of the water crisis in Mendocino County sometime in the next 2 months. And what we could do is we could ask all the water districts in the county to come together with their suggestions of possible funding sources, possible projects, And in the meantime, we'll all look for funding opportunities. And, I don't know what else more we could promise at this point. We can only promise to try to work on this.
Supervisor Haschek.
Well, I think that with the water situation, the plan we created through the budget process is going to provide us with grant writing capabilities, support for our local water agencies, and I think that we'll be able to do a lot of these things. And then this coming year, because there is money available through the state, I think we need to tap into it. It's critical. I don't think anyone on this board thinks that water is not an issue in this county. It's, and then like Supervisor Jurdy said, hey, let's look at other possible funding through the TOT, that contribution we're making. That seems like a reasonable approach. And, but I just think in the political sense, what I've been hearing is if we have a sales tax and it has this water agency, water grants, all this, that people won't go for it. I just don't believe it. And so that's why I propose that 1/8 of a cent for fire, because I think that would be a winner.
Supervisor McGordy.
So 2 points. One to what Supervisor Jurdy talked about. That's exactly what the ad hoc does. Is we do get together and we talk and we kind of have a list. We know what things need to get done. We know what it takes, and it's going to take planning and engineering and very quick movement, because the funding for drought is probably won't. It goes very quickly. There's another round coming up. We don't want to miss it. We got to be at the table. That's all I can tell you is we've got to be at the table. And in response to Supervisor Haschek's comments, I've already forgotten what I was going to say. So, John, you get a pass, but it was semi-critical. I'll give you that. I just want to tell you that I'm a huge supporter of libraries and the fire department. Anybody who watched what they did for First District here doesn't need to wait 6 to 8 years to figure out if they're going to use their money wisely. The first time they show up, they all come, and they put the Hopkins fire out in 2 hours against all great odds. Even though we lost 60 structures, they're extraordinary. So I nobody has to prove anything to me by the fire department. The conditions are getting gnarlier and gnarlier every time we have a fire, and we had 3 of them in the First District last year in that kind of urban-rural interface, and it was extraordinary what they did. So I don't need to wait 6 to 8 years to figure out if they're doing a good job, if they're spending their money wisely. I know we will. That's not going to be an issue for me. So that's my concern. Do I need all the money that I can possibly get from the taxpayers? No. I know what I was going to say. In our district, John, you'd reach a really different conclusion. Maybe people in Third District don't worry so much about water, but boy, it's a huge topic where I am, because it's the whole basis of our lifeblood for our towns and for our main economic engine, which is agriculture. So it's a huge topic here, and that's all I hear about when we talk about what's going to happen. Is the county going to move on this, or are we on our own? So if we've got to have some way of being at the table, if there's a way that we can assure that we've got a technical response this year so that we can take care of water issues, it's got to be funded at a level that's functional. And that's my concern. I don't think $250,000 quite cuts it. So that's my point. Fighting with you guys, I don't like doing it. I'm not here to be oppositional, but as Supervisor Mulheron says, sometimes you got to stand up for what you believe and show your leadership. And she's in the same immediate geographic area. So yeah, probably not important maybe in 4th district or 3rd district. It's very, very important in 1st and 2nd, and that's why we have them linked together.
Supervisor Mulhern.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the proposal that I brought forward was for basically $2 million a year for water projects. And that wasn't for a grant writer. That's for technical assistance to provide the documents so that people have shovel-ready projects. So when there is all of this drought funding, this $23 million that came out last year, that we're ready to go. Congressman Huffman has the potential raising of the Coyote Valley Dam at $3 million over 3 years. Our county budget doesn't have any kind of money to support that. We lose $16 million a year in sales tax revenue as a county because Lake Mendocino is not up fully functional for recreation. That's not to even get into how many times, and I understand maybe coastal supervisors or 3rd district supervisors don't hear the same comment. Why does Sonoma County get all of our water? If we're not at the table with a wallet, I mean, it's one thing to be at the table. It's one thing to be at the table with a wallet and money to participate. Then we are not going to be able to secure our water resources. And it's much bigger than just Ukiah and just Potter Valley. And it's not a trivial amount of money, and it's certainly not money that we can just take from some other discretionary revenue within our budget when we already have budget shortfalls because of health insurance and because of cannabis. And we just went through an entire budget process where we talked extensively about how we didn't have any extra money. There's no extra money. What I'm asking is, hey, voters, do you want to support this in a way where we can have a meaningful impact?
Supervisor Jordy.
Yeah, that gets back to there's a commodity. It's called water. The people who are selling it need to sell it at the market rate. They're selling it at below market rate. And now they're asking for all taxpayers in Mendocino County to pay a sales tax because they're not willing to pay the market rate for water. So there is no reason for a water sales tax. The types of projects the type of assistance we're talking about providing the water purveyors in Mendocino County does not require a sales tax. It requires something in the neighborhood of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, which the county can find if we work at it. And we also know that we have good, smart, intelligent people working for the water districts throughout this county. They're, the ones I talk to are willing to help out each other to get grants. And, yes, we do probably need to help them. Maybe there's someone here in Mendocino County that could be paid part-time or full-time to work with these water districts, with the cities to help them secure additional grants. And that could be the role of the county. But, when people are talking about raising Coyote Dam through property tax, or in this case, a sales tax, a countywide sales tax, that makes no sense. There are water consumers. The consumers of that water can pay for the infrastructure. They don't have to pay with cash. It can be financed with the revenue stream.
Dan, I support your idea that water is a local problem and can be self-funded in a lot of cases. But I want to share, and I support the direction you're going, I think. But the town of Mendocino is not sourcing water from the Potter Valley project. It's not Russian River water. And recently the state sent out what they're calling surveys. This is the Division of Drinking Water. They sent out surveys to about 78 businesses. And the survey basically asks, are you serving water to customers and where are you getting it? How is it tested? And I know that most of those businesses probably get it out of a shallow hole in the backyard. And it probably isn't tested or treated. And technically may not meet drinking water standards. And that's a big revenue source for this county. When you look at the bed tax and the sales tax, I don't think there's anywhere else in the county that generates so much revenue within about 1 square mile. So as much as I'm concerned about wage earners who work in the visitor economy that could be impacted, and general viability of that town, what it's like when there's no water available. I'm also worried about the county revenue. That revenue goes into our general fund. It gets spent everywhere. All 5 of our districts are spending the money that come out of the town of Mendocino's bed tax and sales tax. And I don't see it moving in a good direction. I see the state pulling out the agency that's the stick, not an agency that's a solutions provider. Perhaps that changes. Perhaps the SAFER program will recognize that this is a prime candidate for an actual water system, but it's complicated. We've spent a lot of time on it, and there isn't water nearby. We could source it in District 4 in Casper and run a pipeline down Highway 1. There's no real water nearby. Big River is brackish about 11 miles up. You can't do desal like you can on Noyo. And state-approved well is sealed the first 50 feet. Most of the water in that town flows is surface water between 25 and 50. So I don't think it's just the Potter Valley ag folks who are looking for a countywide sales tax to take all of our money to fix their problems so they can have free water forever. I think we have water problems throughout the county, and I wouldn't support a water tax if it were not solving the problems in all 5 districts. That said, if you're going to campaign against it, I'm likely to bend and go with the fire only, because last thing I want to do is have Board of Supervisors campaigning against the other Board of Supervisors to try to get a tax through voters to solve critical public safety needs. That doesn't sound like a good recipe. We've had past fights on the board. We've had conflict with the sheriff. I don't want to go down that path again. So I'm looking at the rest of you to figure out a plan where everybody gets something, some amount of compromise, and we walk out friends. McGordy.
I just have a question for Dan. Do you feel that the community of Mendocino needs to solve their own problems too?
I think with the assistance that we're talking about at the level of $400,000 a year through the county water agency, with that level of assistance, which we're hoping that our dynamic and amazing state senator, Mike McGuire, the first North Coast state senator to be majority leader since Barry Keene, and probably I think only the second. I think somehow McGuire, with the county's technical assistance with the town of Mendocino, might be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat, but I don't see a sales tax being the solution to the town of Mendocino. So again, in the spirit of compromise, I would like to propose that we, unless there's more discussion, that we propose a 1/4-cent sales tax with the formula brought forward by Supervisor Mulhern for the fire departments, for 90% of the funds and 10% of the funds for fire protection and prevention services, such as dispensable space and fire resistant structure evaluations, vegetation management, fuel reduction, and public education programs and that this tax would be for 8 years with the companion resolution by the board.
I'll second that.
I would appreciate hearing from McGordy and Mulhern. I know this is not the tax plan that you want, but can you work with it if we work on a general fund allocation for our water agency?
Okay, so here's my position. I probably would not support this, in terms of, if we take a vote right now, when it appears on the ballot, I'll probably vote for it because I'm not against fire. I just feel like the water situation is so important. I can't just do nothing. That's kind of how I feel.
And I understand that you can't do nothing, and I feel that as well. And I know if a town or two goes dry, I'm going to look back and think this was a mistake. But if you have one or two supervisors campaigning against, I don't think you can pass it. And in which case, we've really done nothing.
I would not campaign against my supervisors. Once the board makes a decision, we live with the outcome, and I'm going to support whatever who decides to do. I think campaigning against something, unless it's really vile, and this isn't really vile, this is really good. It's just not quite good enough. That's the problem. It doesn't address a key constituency that I can't ignore. That's all.
8 years isn't long enough. It needs to be minimum of 10. I mean, I'd prefer 20. 8 years is not long enough for fire departments to be able to plan and try to figure out future funding. And I really cannot support moving forward without some type of real opportunity to secure all of the water strategies that we've already talked about. And I understand that, there's comments about maybe there's discretionary funding. That's not enough for me. I don't want to sit in this seat and say, well, gee, I think the board's going to come up with some money. So I would hope that if there are 3 supervisors that support moving forward, that they would request more than 8 years.
Supervisor Jurdy, would you consider 10 years?
I think 10's reasonable.
And is there a way for us to couple this with a board commitment for identifying funds in our existing revenue to support water planning and research for water projects? And I don't mean just tell staff go find it, or sort of wishful thinking that there's creative. This means hard decision making about we're going to cut some other priorities temporarily because water matters so much.
So I'm committed to that, and Supervisor Hashak and I actually offered a proposal a couple meetings back.
Oh, about the cutting the marketing for the county. So I'm not 100% against that, but my concern at the time, and it remains, if we cut the marketing budget and we see fewer people spending money here, we're going to see a reduction in our taxes, and we're hurting wage earners. So if we were to somehow study it and find it doesn't make a difference to the economy whether we market the county or not, by all means, let's cut it if we're wasting the money. I just don't want to cut it and find that we haven't saved any money at all and we've hurt people who are working. Supervisor Mulhern.
Sure. I've read the draft implementation study for the water agency, and I know that there are county water needs all over in every single district. Supervisor Jurdy, you just tried to cut $25,000 from IWPC, which is a JPA agency that we are members of, which provides water not only to Mendocino County, but secures water for other resources. And again, our agriculture economy brings in $16 million, $20 million per year. I mean, I can't understand how, moving forward, that's going to be something that will become a priority for you for the way that the last couple of weeks have gone. That's a concern for me.
Supervisor Haschek.
Well, Supervisor Jurdy brought up a good point. Is a couple of weeks ago we had that discussion about the bid match that the county was doing. And, it's not that we were cutting any kind of advertising budget. We were just keeping it status quo. Their budget was going up. Their advertising was 92% increase. So we were just saying, hey, let's look at the status quo. Let's save a couple $100,000 here or there. And if I don't see any other places in this county budget where we can get that kind of easy return. As far as the water needs of this county, we have incredible needs, and we all know it. It's just, how do we get there? And I'm just looking at this sales tax. We already have the Ukiah Daily Journal against it. We have the Mendocino County Observer against it. We'll probably have the AVA against it. You know, so just the reality is, whether you have one supervisor or two supervisors not supporting it, it's not popular already. And so that's what we need to consider. You know, that's the reality of it.
Thank you, John. I think that's right. It doesn't matter if it's a good idea politically. I don't see it being feasible at this point. And yet we've identified water is a critical need. I think it's in the top 3. How do we get a couple supervisors working on specific reallocation of discretionary funds? I see a few different combinations here. I think Jurdy needs to be one of those, because if a plan comes forward, I would like to know it has his support when it arrives. And I see Supervisor Mulhern and Supervisor McGordy as probably good partners on that effort. Basically, when staff brought forward the reality that we don't have enough money this year, we have less revenue, and here's some things we might cut, and you saw the public backlash, that's the position you will be in to support water. And I think being a county supervisor at this point requires that level of ranking of needs. And so I don't know what your ideas will be, but I'm likely to support it. I think we need to address water. Supervisor Mulhern.
Considering there's this Brown Act violation being thrown around, I certainly don't think that another ad hoc is going to be helpful. We have a drought ad hoc, we have a budget ad hoc. I don't think we need a new ad hoc.
Well, generally I would agree. You might have noticed I'm trying to avoid creating ad hocs that I have to serve on. But county council needs direction. And the best direction we can give, if we want the voters to support us, is all 5 of us agree, and we're all out there campaigning and we believe in it. And I don't see us getting there today. And we're not going to hash it out at the next meeting and have county council in real time author the language. So between now and then, either we call a special meeting or 2 of you work together. Supervisor Jurdy.
Yeah, I would work with anyone that wants to look at how to fund the county water agency or how to fund water projects in the county. I think it needs a holistic approach. There's not going to be a single silver bullet. It's going to probably come from dozens of sources because we have so many needs in this county.
Dan, I agree. I don't think all 5 of us will sit well with a plan to hold a workshop in a couple months and think about ideas. And so what I'm looking for is, can we support fire with the sales tax, firm that up, and couple it with specific funding plans for how to move water forward out of our existing budget. And if you're willing to sit on that, I would be very pleased.
I would work with anybody who wants to work on that subject, and I'm not waiting for a workshop.
McGordy?
I'm already working on that kind of as Lone Ranger, so probably be good to pull down into the conversation, even though we may not agree on everything.
McGordy, you already sit on an ad hoc related to that issue. Is that right?
Not exactly. So I, if we can bring CEO Anto into the conversation. So we're kind of working on trying to figure out, with the existing budgets that we've got, how to put together a kind of a water resource team. It may not be an actual department, maybe a way of having in-house people to work on it, and working with the cooperative extension. So
Glenn, I guess I'm worried about Brown Act. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know you're on a lot of ad hocs that could overlap. How would the board feel about Jurdy and Mulhern working together? I don't think there's any Brown Act conflict there. And at least we would be guaranteed they would come back with a compromise. If they both support it, I imagine at least the majority, hopefully all 5 of us, would come into support.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Mulhern? You, for you and for, it's 6 o'clock, it's 6:30, we have other items. A compromise that all 5 will support needs to be reached before July 12th. Are you willing to work with Dan to come back with an agreement both of you can support that'll address fire, a little bit for fire safe clearing, and water in some way? Water probably won't be out of the sales tax. It will be general fund cuts that free up budget to reallocate.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it may be a little bit cleaner if you simply have it be the water piece. And if there is a proposal on the fire today, I could start the drafting. I'm a little bit worried if there's essentially ad hoc specific to the fire tax proposal as to what that might mean with respect to prior conversations. I'll admit I haven't fully analyzed, and frankly, it's getting a little bit late.
I hear you. So I guess that would be the proposal, to direct county council to work on a 1/4 cent general tax for fire, 90% according to the fire district's allocation table, 10% to Mendocino County Fire Safe Council, and Jurdy and Mulhern to find a compromise for funding water out of our existing budget. And I imagine the fire tax would have support if the 2 supervisors are able to also bring back a water plan by the 12th.
I would support that.
Check.
Yeah, I'd support it.
McGordy?
Oh, well, I guess you're right. If you're going to do something, at least do one thing right. I just kind of feel a little betrayed about our water situation. That's all. And I'll stop there.
And Mulhern? All right, I think we have direction. I can stay here all night if you folks want to keep talking about it, but we have other items.
Well, I guess one of the key issues will be what they bring back on the 12th for cuts.
Yeah, don't disappoint us. And we recognize what a difficult task it'll be. Jurdy and I were there when we were working on the budget with CEO. That's now over and we've reported out, but this is a lean county.